Today's story is a very interesting one. It's a little captivating and it's got like a little twist at the end. It's interesting because this is one story that really got me thinking about what people, especially women, go through in life and how sometimes the place where you find them has no resemblance to the life that they had before. So it's Friday night, yeah. Thank God it's Friday. And on Fridays, I like to do my work at night. You know how Lagos is now. Lagos, Friday nights, when you go out, I mean, from dusk till dawn, everywhere is buzzing. Like, everywhere is so bright. It's like noonday sun. Lagos is buzzing on Friday nights. So on Friday nights, I do my work at night. So I start work sometime around 9 p.m. and I work all through the night into the morning. And then Saturday morning, I just go home and chill. Yeah, so I'm out, I'm in my car, I'm doing trips. I like to do my work on the island. When I'm working at night, I like to do my work on the island. Why? Because that's where all the cool spots, all the big clubs, all the popular places, most of the coolest places you find online on Instagram, and you find them on the island. And when people come to Lagos, they like to visit all of those places. So, and of course, they like to do those visits on the weekend. So you have Friday night, Saturday night, even Sunday. Sunday's a very huge buzzing day on the island in Lagos. So I'm walking, I'm doing trips. I've done like a couple of trips. I'm in the mid hour of my work shift. It's about 2:30 a.m. I'm inside Lekki Phase One. Now, Lekki Phase One is like the heart of the island when it comes to nightlife and some really cool estates and where people live around there. So I'm in there. It's about 2:30 a.m. Sitting in my car. I have something to sip, so I'm just sipping, scrolling through my phone, looking at some YouTube short videos, and then I get a request. Now, the location where this request is coming from is one that I'm very familiar with. And if you drive in Lagos, or you know, if you're someone who lives on the island and you're conversant with the culture and the life, you would quickly be able to recognize when I mention the name of the street or the kind of buildings. Now, there's this thing we call in Lagos, we call them runs girls. This group of girls, what they do basically is they cohabit. So you could have like a 6 bedroom duplex or apartment, and then within that apartment you could have like over 25, 30 girls living in there together. So they just use that as a base station for their operations. Now, when I say runs girls, it's what everybody else, or every other culture will call the call girl. So yeah, that's how they function. Now, there's certain locations within the island, within Lekki specifically, where you can find where these girls live, and those areas are very popular. So I get a request from one of these locations, and immediately I'm thinking in my head, oh yeah, the girl's about to let loose, into the night. She's about to go in. So, of course, I know what to expect with this kind of client. Sometimes they could be quite difficult. Sometimes they could be troublesome. Sometimes, I mean, it could go like you just don't know what to expect with this kind of girl. So in my mind, I'm already assuming and thinking, okay, yeah, this is what I'm expecting. But I always like to provide professional service. So as usual, I do what I do. I make the calls, I establish the trip, and I quickly drive to the pickup location. Now, park my car, I'm waiting a couple of minutes, and the way Moturayo sounded over the phone, she seemed like someone who was in a hurry. She seemed like she was late for some appointment, and she sounded very desperate, like she really needed this ride. And I thought, okay, of course, I'll be available to take you and drop you off as quickly as you want the trip to be. So I'm sitting outside just expecting for someone who's crazily dressed, showing a lot of flash, maybe some high heel, purse, heavy makeup, hair, lashes, the whole 9 yards. I'm sitting there expecting someone with this profile to walk out of the gate. And sure enough, when the door opens, a lady walks out. She's slim, a little tall, wearing a bit of high heels. She has like some tights on. She's wearing a tank top, so her belly's all exposed. Her hair, makeup, nails, everything done. And then she steps out of the house and into the car. As soon as she sits in the car, I begin to trip. And as we drive, what I usually like to do when I pick up a rider like this is remain as quiet as possible and as polite as possible, because with Aaron's girl, you really don't know what to expect. You don't want to say something that will rub her off the wrong way, and then she could just go off on you. And if she goes off on you, you know you got trouble in your hands. And number one thing you're thinking about is how to secure the bag. You just want the trip to go as smoothly as possible, collect your money, and everybody goes their way. Yeah, so she sits in the car. Of course, we exchanged initial pleasantries. Oh, how you doing? I hope you're having a good day today. Da, 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 da. And then, it's all good. She's seated, I'm seated. Trip has started. We're driving. Put on a little bit of music, and everything is smooth and everything is nice. So as we drove, out of the blue, she made a statement, and she said, "You sounded like one of the cool-headed ones. You know how crazy Lagos drivers could be, especially at, such hours like this." And I thought that was a compliment. So I said, "Oh yeah, I am cool-headed." And after she said that, I began to think in my head. I was wondering, first off, her accent sounded like someone who wasn't from Lagos. And secondly, the way she spoke to me was so cool, so calm, and her communication was very clean. So I began to wonder, and I had to ask a question. I was like, "Oh, where are you from?" And she replied that she is originally from Oyo State, which is Ibadan, in the southwestern part of Nigeria, but that she had lived in the northern part of Nigeria for over 15 years. Hence the accent that I was hearing. So I asked her, "How long have you lived in Lagos?" And she said, she was like, "I've lived in Lagos for 2 years. I moved here 2 years ago when I she hesitated because she caught herself. She realized she was about to go into a story about how she moved to Lagos and what prompted the relocation. And then she paused and was like, "I don't even know why I'm talking to you about this, but you seem like a nice person, so I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, what happened and how it went." And then I was eager to hear her story, you know. And she went on to narrate to me how she was married. She got engaged, married the love of her life. They were so in love. They did the whole thing, the whole, everything. They did the traditional wedding, they did the church wedding, they went on honeymoon. She flipped out her phone and began to show me pictures of their honeymoon in Dubai, how they went on trips, where they mounted horses, took rides in the desert. And from the pictures, they seemed so happy, like a really happy couple. And then she went on to describe to me that, "Look, I had such a beautiful life. I was so happy. I was married to the love of my life. Everything was going perfectly." Now, remember, remember very well that I said this is someone who came out of a house where the call girls, the runs girls, where they lived, and I couldn't marry. I couldn't marry the two situations. Someone who was coming out from that house, and then the story that she was now telling me and the pictures that I was seeing. She went on to describe how, of course, when they got married, they moved in together, they started living together, they were happy, everything was going perfectly well until she realized that her husband had a a thing where he usually would just have like some jealousy bouts, and because of that he would sometimes get very violent. He'll get violent with her. And she said, one night he got so violent, he beat her up so bad that she became blind. and she couldn't see for 2 weeks. I mean, the whole family, everybody was involved. Her family couldn't fight for her as much as she would have expected, so she felt a little betrayed and abandoned there. The husband's family weren't even trying to defend her in any way, shape, or form, so she felt alone and abandoned and blind, you know. So she said eventually, when she regained her sight, she packed her things, left the husband's house, and decided to just go on her own because she was really afraid that one of those violent situations could result in, her losing her life. And so she left the house, left her husband, and she said to her surprise, a month passed, 2 months passed, and nobody from the husband's house or the husband's family or the husband himself, nobody came looking for her. And so she assumed, since they don't want me, it must mean that they don't want me in the relationship, in the marriage anymore. So I might as well just, go off and go my way. And so she decided to relocate from the city entirely so that he couldn't even find her if ever he came to his senses and wanted to, reach out and look for her. So she packed the things. And the funny part of this story is, at this time when the husband was being violent to her, she was about 4 months pregnant, and she was expecting a child. And after she had left the house, nobody came to look for her. Even with that information that she was pregnant, nobody, wanted to look for her or take, to ask how she's doing, how's the baby doing. Nobody cared. So she decided to take her chances, relocate to Lagos and start over, start a new life. So she moved to Lagos and she moved in with a friend at first. And while she was living with the friend, she realized that the friend and the lifestyle the friend was living was a run scale lifestyle. And because she had no support, she had nobody to help her, no money, and nothing at all, she began to, move in that direction. And her friend began to introduce her to one or two clients and men in Lagos. She also described how she gave birth to her daughter. If you live in Lagos, then you would know. If you live on the island, especially if you live on the island in Lagos, in Lekki to be precise, you would know where they call Jakonde roundabout. There's a traffic light there now, but we still refer to that place as Jakonde roundabout. So she described how on the day when she gave birth to her daughter, she was alone in the house. Her friend had left the city to go see a client somewhere, out of the city in Abuja. And she was there by herself. And she began to feel the pains of labor and she knew exactly what it was. So she called a cab. But it was so difficult for her getting a cab that day. And she was all by herself and no one to help, that the taxi that she eventually got was like 3 hours later, and she was just going through labor all by herself in the house. And so when the taxi eventually came, she got in the back seat and instructed the driver to take her to the closest hospital. So while they were driving, she narrated how when they got to Jakonde roundabout, at that traffic light, she said when the traffic light stopped, that's when my baby popped out. She gave birth to her daughter in the taxi at that traffic light. I was touched because it was difficult for me marrying the person who was sitting in my car. The way she looked, the way she was dressed, the hour at which she was going out, and comparing this person to the pictures she had shown me on her phone, it was difficult marrying the person who was happily married and going to honeymoon in the UAE and enjoying a happy life to the person that was sitting in my car right now. It was difficult also just hearing her story, how she gave birth to her daughter in the traffic light, in somewhere in Lekki, the life that she's now living, because absolutely I could tell that she was going to a client's house and she was dressed for it, she looked like it, and it was just, I was completely, I don't even know the word to describe how I felt. I felt out of place. I was humbled because her life had turned in an entirely different direction that she ever expected. I'm sure when she first got married. I tried to encourage her. I tried to tell her to keep her head up. Sometimes life throws curves at you, you know, but try to keep your head up. Try to fight for your life. And things, no matter what happens, if you're positive, if you fight for it, things will turn out for the best. And she was glad, and she said thank you. And she was so excited that she had someone that she could talk to. She saved my number. She insisted that we remain, like we keep in touch. And when I got to our destination, she came down from the car. Her fare was, I picked her up from somewhere in Lekki Phase 1, and I took her to somewhere around Chevron Drive in Lekki area. Her fare was about 1,800 naira. She willingly paid the fare and gave me a tip of about 500 naira extra. I felt really sad and sober after the trip. After she walked into the house, I kept thinking about her. I kept wondering how it is that people just go through things, and when we see them, the first thing we do is just judge. We don't know their stories. We don't know where they've been. I wondered where her daughter is. I wondered how her daughter was doing. I wondered how this whole change was affecting that very poor child. This world is really a crazy place. You know, you it's good to know a person is to love a person, and until you know them, you really can't judge them. So, yeah, right now I'm gonna head straight back into the pool so that I can get more rides, make more money, hear more stories, and until I see you next time, this is Gidi Driver.